Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Queerness Diaries. Today, I'm joined all the way from the US by Scott Fullerton. So, how are you today, Scott?
I'm doing great, Connor. Thanks so much for having me on. How are you?
Yeah, awesome. And thanks so much for coming on. It's always great to have a fellow podcast host, especially you're coming up, aren't you, to your 10th anniversary in the new year, which must be such an awesome thing, to have a podcast so successful and because it's amazing how fast the time goes, isn't it, when you get into the podcasting world and all the people you can meet.
10 years have flown by and I'm getting older and I don't like it at all, but at least the podcast is having fun. So that's good.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you and to delve in today into your diary and hear, all the different chapters and where you've been on because I was looking at your LinkedIn. I mean, you're still doing quite a lot, from coffee to podcasting, and it must be, fun to balance all these different things. And I always say, with LinkedIn as well, I've met so many people through there this year and the networking opportunities. And this is the great thing, isn't it, with podcasts, how it is now. You can meet people from all over and connect with the community. And it's just such a fantastic way to meet people.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's been really an interesting ride and I get bored easy. So I try new things from time to time. And I started with one show 10 years ago and did
Yeah.
primarily that for the first year or so. And then I thought, let's try some other ideas. So I've done a different couple things. Now I have like 7 shows on my network that I do,
Yeah.
little mini episodes and stuff. So that's a lot of fun. And the coffee company I started just as a way to kind of give back to charity. So I don't really make any money off
Yeah.
that, but it was something fun to do. So I like to try new things.
Yeah, I think that's great as well. And I'm really excited today to sort of delve into your diary and really, you started off all the way in California, right? And now you're in Ohio. And so I'm really excited to sort of hear about your upbringing and sort of the roads you've been down. And I thought it'd be great to go all the way back to the beginning, right? To chapter 1 and those early days in Southern California. And yes, sort of if you could take me on sort of the beginning chapters and how you grew up and sort of family life, how that was for you growing up in Southern California.
Yeah, early life in California was a lot of fun. I was born and raised out there. My parents were from back east where I'm at now, but
Yeah,
they'd both moved to California when they were kids and met as high school kids or elementary school kids or something. Ended up
yeah,
having me and my brothers there. I have 2 younger brothers, and it was a great place to grow up. Where I grew up in California, I was like in the middle of the universe. I was an
yeah.
hour and a half away from the beach. I was an hour away from LA Hollywood. I was an hour and a half from the mountains and skiing. So there were
Yeah,
times me and my friends from high school, we would go up skiing in the mountains in the winter, but the beach would still be 67 degrees. So we'd drive down and have a
yeah.
bonfire on the beach. So it was a
Oh,
lot of fun.
nice.
So I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I stayed in the closet most of my life. I don't know why, other than just it was a thing to do. I'm a little older than probably most of your guests on here. And at the time, there just wasn't. When I went to high school, I did not know any other out people in the high school. Everyone at least usually knows 1 to 3 know, right?
Yeah,
And when I
yeah,
went to high school, I didn't know anybody that was out in my high school. You had a couple of inklings on a couple of the theater kids, maybe, but you
yeah.
never knew and never wanted to say anything. So it's like I didn't have that kind of experience in high school where I could even feel like I could be out.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of my funny stories is one of my good friends in high school that our senior year, 2 days before we graduated, was driving and got us in a car wreck and almost killed both of us. And I didn't know all through high school. And then I found out 10 years later that he came out as gay.
Yeah.
So it's like very funny.
Oh, like it's crazy, isn't it? The things that happen like in school, and I always think the memories stay so vivid from like these times when we're going through school life. It doesn't seem like things we'll remember um, in adult life, but I can still vividly remember like all my classes, everyone I used to hang out with, and yeah, similar to you. Like growing up, I didn't have many like there was no sort of figure to look to for guidance or there wasn't even much on TV like 15, 20 years ago. There was the odd show like Queer as Folk and a few shows, but
Right.
not that much to look to. And so in school, even though I had inklings about 1 or 2 people it was after school. And then I think from my school, my two best friends when I was in my late teens turned out to be lesbians. There was like two other gay guys from school, but in school itself, it's like no one was out. And then, funny enough, we bond afterwards or trauma bonded. But how was it sort of for you, like navigating school and sort of that, sort of navigating coming out the closet and opening up to people? Because it's very confronting, I always find, when you've only got one or two people you can confide in, if any, and you've got this,
Right.
this feeling of a weight of a big secret, and you want someone that you can confide in and tell your stories and have a gossip with or just open up. But how is it? How was it for you, sort of going through school and sort of not being able to be open and come out?
Yeah, in high school. And you know what's weird is I don't even really remember gay being a horrible thing. I don't remember being a lot of the
Mm.
slur words called around. It just wasn't much of a
Yeah,
thing at all. It just wasn't talked about, which is strange. So I don't know
yeah,
why I felt you kind of feel that internal, they have the internalized where something's wrong with it. So you don't really want
yeah,
to say it, but you don't know what it is. And no
yeah.
one's really talking about it. So it was kind of that thing. And I love to work. And so I got my first job when I was 14
Yeah.
by accident because I didn't know you needed a work permit back then. So it's like I started working and I was like the assistant manager of an ice cream shop at the time I was 16. So
Yeah.
I had a car when I was 16. So I was very much working and I joined this club. It was one of the Masonic clubs for kids
Yeah.
called 𝐃𝐢𝐚𝐫𝐢𝐸. And so I joined that. And so it's very much that became my social life more than school because I worked during school hours. Sometimes I'd go
Mhm.
right after work to school. So I didn't do a lot
Yeah.
of the after school activities, but I did this fraternal order kind of things on the nights and the weekends. So there was lots of dances
Mhm.
and you go all over the state to different
Yeah.
events or at least within a 30-mile range of my area. And so
Mhm.
that was when I kind of first started. We were doing dances. I'm looking at other guys there,
Yeah.
and we're all dressed up, looking nice in our suits
Yeah.
to the events we had to be at. And because I was working, I started hanging out with these work people. My very first um, encounter with another guy, I was a junior in high school. I was working with this kid at
Yeah.
a burger shop, right? And we were hanging out at the pool that summer and just he kept kind of, we were goofing around in the pool and he just kind of kept
Yeah.
slacking to my arms and we just started touching each other very inappropriately in the pool
Yeah.
when we were the only ones there. And it kind of just was like a plaything then. No, neither of us would talk about it. None of us would say what it was, but then we'd
Yeah.
spend the night at each other's house and we would play around a little bit. It wouldn't
Yeah.
go all the way super far, but it was enough to know that, okay, I have these feelings that I know what are there now. So it was a very kind of a casual start, mostly outside of school, which was strange.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine as well, like when you are growing up and you have those first crushes and you don't know if it's reciprocal, it's a hard thing to try and approach because you don't want to risk it with the other person necessarily in case, they're not um, going to take it well. And at the same time, you're thinking you're getting a vibe sometimes from someone, I think we've all been there, through either in school years or afterwards, whenever we sort of find, who we are. But it's very confronting, isn't it? At first, it's like that best kept secret that you want to find someone to have that connection with, but you're scared to know how to approach it. I mean, it's part of the journey of finding ourselves as well.
Right. Yeah, and I was like, so I would go, like I said, I was in the middle of everything. So I would drive into Hollywood, LA a lot on the weekend because I had my car when I was 16 and everything. And I would
Yeah.
kind of mess around there when I thought I was far enough away from home where
Yeah.
no one really know anything, right? So I would
Yeah.
meet guys out at different places out there and just it was just kind of and I had my mustache when I was 14. So I looked a little older. And even when I was younger, I looked a little older. So I was able
Yeah.
to kind of pass for different things and go to different college bars. We would go to some of the colleges around town in LA and everything, the UCLA's and the
Yeah.
USC's, and kind
Oh,
of hang out
nice.
there. But then I had a weird thing happen though, because when I grew up and like I said, being a little older, after being out for a couple years, that's when AIDS started rearing its head. And then I got scared to death.
Mm,
I didn't want to do anything all of a sudden and didn't even want to
yeah.
confront it. So I kind of went from being really exploratory and really wanting to learn more about myself to being scared to death to learning more about myself. So it was a very weird time.
Yeah, I can imagine on your mental health as well. It must have been really difficult for a lot of people to sort of have this liberation and freedom and then suddenly go through this time where it was like, everything that you knew and was trying to find out, it was like suddenly you had to repress so many parts of yourself and you didn't know where things were going from one week to the next. And really only through the support of the community, I imagine it was only through that a lot of people had someone to talk to and confide in, because still for so many people, they, either weren't out to families, or especially imagine during the 80s, a lot of people just shut down and did not want to
Right.
talk to anyone because of all the stigma around it. So I imagine it must have been something that taken a lot of toll on you personally going through that time, because you go from going to LA, having these nights out and the freedom, and then suddenly everything's completely uncertain.
It was very scary because, like I said, you're in your sexual awakening, right? You're in your early
Yeah,
20s or whatever, and so you're meeting all these great people, but now you're scared what's going to. And it's like you don't have that background when you're going to other places. Like people in
yeah,
your hometown, you kind of know a little bit about their background, at least
yeah,
sometimes. When I'd go to LA or I'd go to different places, to the beach or whatever it happened to be, I didn't know the people I was hooking up with made it even more scared. So I would really,
yeah,
it would take a lot for me to really to let someone in. We would have to go on lots of like lunch dates or coffee dates or something rather before I would even kiss somebody at the time, because you
yeah,
kept learning more information as you went along, almost like COVID was for this generation, right? Where they kept
yeah,
saying different things caused it, and you kind of tried to you stopped doing things and slowly started adding things. That's how
yeah,
my early HIV um, life was, and it was very scary at the time.
yeah. And I think as well with the media back then, they would, if there was something that could be blown up into the worst possible story, that's all people had to go off as well. It's not like, as horrific as the internet is in modern day world, for us in the community, we can find other people and talk to them and dispel all these myths and craziness. But back then, it's like things will get printed, in the media, and it's like the worst possible things, because only, mostly homophobic outlets, it was a different time, were printing them. And so there was a lot of misinformation as well. And at least I suppose as the years have gone on with media, as tough as it can be sometimes, and we still have a long way to go even in the present. A good thing is with the community now, we have this platform to, reach out to each other and dispel like a lot of these horror stories. But, back then it's like, I mean, it's changed so much. It's like everything's changing
Exactly, and
rapidly.
like I said, back then it was AOL was basically starting out and things, so it was you didn't have
Yeah,
all the resources at your fingertips at the
yeah,
time, so now you feel a lot more comfortable, and then funny enough, then all of a sudden, I started to feel more comfortable with myself, I'm starting to come out now in my
yeah,
late 20s and starting to get in my early 30s, and I
yeah,
thought, well, and I'm kind of feeling myself as being part of the LGBT community a bit, so I
yeah,
start blogging a little bit and talking, and you don't realize how much your name kind of gets associated. All of a sudden, you're searchable and all these things. So then it
yeah,
was another thing to kind of deal with the out and openness. And it's like you start Googling your name, and there's a lot of stuff on me for
yeah.
if you didn't know I was gay then, put my name in a search engine and you found out pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, it's so true, isn't it? Like it's crazy when you put your name into Google, like what comes up and how precise, or it finds like a random photo from like 10 years ago that's on some blog or something. But at the same time, being able to express ourselves and, whether it's through blogs, podcasts, whatever it is, having that outlet to express, our thoughts and is so important, especially when you've had a period of time of holding everything in. And for you, how was the sort of experience when you came out to friends and family?
Yeah, I slowly started to come out, like I said, to friends, I think, as I was starting to do my blog and everything. And I'm kind of a fearless person asking for people. It's why I've been able to podcast
Yeah,
for so long. I remember I was blogging back then, and I decided I wanted to reach out to Judy Shepard, Matthew Shepard's mom, and I
yeah,
emailed her, and she was one of the first people I talked to on my blog and
awesome.
talking about different things. So it's like
Yeah,
that fearlessness was nice for that part, but then when it
yeah,
started coming out, I was very scared. And so I started talking. I had a couple of good friends because I was still, I wasn't out totally as far as going out. I was out to myself, but I
yeah,
wasn't going out to the clubs or the bars that much. I was busy
yeah,
working. I was busy doing my blog and stuff. And I was very much curious. So I would kind of look into a lot of
mhm,
things and kind of research a lot of things. And then I decided my first friend that I met at the library, kind of, we're both slowly perusing
mhm.
they have one gay section, like one row of books. And we both have, it was one of those chance meetings in the gay section of the Barnes and
Yeah,
Noble. And so like I came out to a stranger first, and that was almost as hard as coming out to your family because it's the first
yeah,
person you came out to ever. And it was just we just kind of sat down and talked. We were at Barnes and Noble, so we had coffee afterwards and just talked about our
yeah,
experience. And it was so freeing to really talk about all these different things. And I'm sure you found
mhm,
this with all of your guests over the last 8 months or so, that it gets
yeah,
freeing to talk about it, right? The more you talk about it, the more
yeah,
you feel open and the more confident you are in yourself, right?
yeah. So true. It's like suddenly when you have someone you can, confide in, or just the general chit chat, just talk about guys or going out, whatever it is. It's so freeing just to be able to have someone to fully express yourself in and not have to monitor every different aspect. I always say it's a bit like a chameleon sort of shedding the layers because we build up these different sort of protective layers to ourselves. And
Right.
when we're sort of around new people, it's learning to let those layers go and also trying to find, who we really are under all the layers. Because sometimes we build up these big walls, when we might be
Yeah.
growing up, especially workplaces as well. I was always fine in sort of college environments and with my friends, but the workplaces that I worked in the UK were very typical straight. No one was out. If someone was, then they got ridiculed, even if it was in a jokey way. And so when you find someone that you can just talk and express yourself without having to monitor or think before you speak about everything you're saying, it is really freeing, isn't it? It's like, oh, thank God, I can just, let the armor off now.
Right. Yeah, moving to Ohio is actually when it kind of my opening freedom. I mean, I was living
Yeah.
I moved out when I was 18 and everything, and I lived all over California, and I went up to Oregon for 4 years and lived in Oregon on the West
Yeah.
Coast of the US for 4 years. And I was doing my own kind of life, but I was still almost in the closet just with myself, even though there was nobody around,
Yeah.
parents or family or anything. Like you said, at work it's a little different, but I was working in the restaurant industry. So there was a restaurant industry, you can't swing a cat without hitting a gay person usually. So at least
Yeah.
I started meeting people, right? I knew who they were and there were people being accepted, even though I wouldn't necessarily come out to everybody. I met
Yeah.
people, I worked with people, and it was a little more comfortable with it. And then I
Yeah.
moved to Ohio to take care of my parents. My parents had moved back here when I was living in Oregon, and I
Yeah.
came back to help them out a bit. And at that point, I just didn't feel like being in the closet anymore. So I said,
Yeah.
because it's like my second month here, and I'm going out to a couple of the gay clubs and stuff that I found in the area. And my parents are like, "Who do you even know? You've only been here 2 months. How do you know these
Yeah.
people?" It's like, well, I have my own little family actually, and it's at these gay
Yeah.
clubs, and they were actually I was very lucky. They were very accepting, so I
Yeah.
had that luckiness going for me. Then I started working in a restaurant here, and same thing. There was lots of gay people, and I came out with them. And so I started building this community both inside my work and outside my work, which helped a
Yeah.
lot. And that kind of, as you know, you kind of build up a little confidence each time you come out to
Yeah.
somebody. But it's weird though. How many times do we have to come out? We have to come out to all of our
Oh, I
new
know.
friends, to all of our
Yeah.
old relatives we haven't told. I mean,
Yeah.
we're constantly coming out. Even at my age, I'm constantly coming out to people. If I decide to start a new job or start a new, or bring someone, or go to a new
Yeah.
church or something, you have
Yeah.
to, you're starting all over again, right?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like life for some reason is a never-ending cycle of just, you know, I'm I think as I've gotten older, it doesn't bother me as much. But before I used to be like, oh, well, maybe they're going to know, so I'm just going to say, it used to be something that I just want to get out the way with people or maybe judge their reactions. Nowadays, I don't, it doesn't bother me that much. I
Yeah.
remember when I started a new job last year. I went in on the first day and I was like, I've got ADHD and I'm gay. It's all out there. There's like 30 people, like all starting. And I was like,
Nice.
I'm just going to say it because I'm so tired of, what people know or what they ask or they pick up on it. But it's very true, though, that when we start to find ourselves, we build this chosen family. And, in finding this chosen family as well, we can become really close to a lot of them. And they kind of guide us through, because I mean, my 20s, especially when I was in Madrid, were messy sometimes, But having this sort of chosen family, it becomes really important because they are more than friends. They've lived through similar experiences and they kind of know what it's like to go through these things like, the perceived rejection and all these things that can happen to us. And I bet for you, like moving to Ohio, it must have been so great to start to build up, those friends that became a chosen family that you've got so many great memories with.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, like I said, my best friend was one of the local gay bar bartenders there, and so
Yeah.
I would sit with him and close the bar every night. So I learned, I met most of the
Yeah.
community just from sitting and talking to him and sipping on my club soda. I'm not a big drinker, but I they made some great conversations, and so I relish those years so much. I mean, we all have regrets. I mean, one of my regrets is because of restaurant, I bebopped around a lot because I was good at my job. So I'd switch from, I
Yeah.
worked for like 4 different locations for one restaurant, opening different restaurants. I'd go do the same thing for another. And it's very hard to keep a core group of friends that way because I'm moving to different
Yeah.
cities and states. So I remember when I first moved here, I got this one restaurant job, and in 5 years I worked with them, I went from here in Ohio to New York, back to
Mhm.
Ohio to Massachusetts, back to New
Oh,
York.
wow. Yeah.
And it's like you can't at different parts of New York. So it's not like you're going back to the same friend group area. So
Yeah.
it's very different. Plus, I'm a little shy. As much as I love to talk, I'm not the most
Mhm.
outgoing person. So it's
Yeah.
very hard to. Once you're a friend of mine, we're kind of a friend for life kind of thing. But I have a
Yeah.
very small circle of friends. So it's a good and
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I think a lot of us can relate to that. I think, especially, when we do things like podcasts, people can think, oh, he's so social, he's out there online. But sometimes I'm the same. I'm quite a shy person in my day to day life. And I mean, even though I've done things like, I was a teacher for several years, like standing up in front of a group of people was always fine. But I used to struggle when I was out in small groups of friends. But I think as well, like, yeah, you just reach a point where you've been more comfortable with yourself. But I imagine it was very exciting though, having the busyness of the restaurant and getting to live in all these different places. But
Yeah.
it's sort of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you make all this progress with your career, but then the sort of sometimes we get that nagging feeling like, oh, maybe I want to settle down a bit, but I don't want to slow
Right.
down with my career. But then if we slow down, imposter syndrome can creep in. It's sort of one of those never-ending cycles as well. So how did you sort of balance it with the restaurant and your personal life through the years? Because I know for a lot of people it's like a never ending. I mean, I'm still trying to find that balance, but for a lot of us it's a never ending sort of thing, isn't it? Finding that comfortability with,
Right.
and what is the balance?
It was very hard at first, especially because restaurant, you're either hanging out with restaurant people because you're on such an off different cycle than everyone else. You're working weekends, you're working
Yeah.
nights. So unless you're making friends with the restaurant, and I always kind of went into a management role, so we were technically not supposed to really fraternize too much with the
Yeah.
rest of the staff, even though you could to some extent, but you really weren't supposed to. So it was like I kind of had to keep a certain distance from all my friends at work. but then I was working weird hours. So my other friends, they were doing things when I didn't have time. So it was a
Yeah.
hard balance for a while. And it took a bit until you kind of get established in your lane where you can kind of figure things out and start asking for your own days off. And then unfortunately slash fortunately, my dad got very ill. And so I had to go home and take care of him. And he asked me to quit my job. I kind of had to quit my job to take care of him. My dad was a
Yeah.
big guy. He was like 6'2", 285 pounds. My mom's
Mm.
5 foot period, about 140 pounds. So she couldn't
Yeah.
really maneuver him around or anything. So I came home to take care of him. And he said, well, I want you to kind of just take care of me and then take care of your mom. And he ended up
Yeah.
passing away a short time later. So I kind of almost
Mm.
semi-retired for a while. And that's when, but then I started doing the blog because I didn't know what else to do, and started doing the
Yeah.
podcast. I mean, excuse me, the podcast when I was home with him. So then all of a sudden that became a life of its own. And then I just
Mm.
started really enjoying the podcasts. And I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I make the mistake of calling about 400 people friends who I really only know 4 times a year or
Yeah.
4 times over different podcast interviews. But you get this chosen family through all of your guests, and you
Yeah.
get to live vicariously through other people, and that's been kind of fun a lot of times, and sometimes a
Yeah.
little lonely when you really start doing it as much as I've been doing it too. So it's been kind of I'm trying to mix things now even more so than when I was in the restaurant.
Yeah.
And now that I'm kind of taking my time at it, I and I'm a little more picky in who I choose my friends, everything. So it's been a little different dichotomy now that I've slowed
Yeah.
down the work side of me so much.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think with social media as well, it's evolved so much, like with the community and being able to network, especially, with platforms like LinkedIn, and I've used things like Meetup in Spain, which I'm not sure if they have in the US, to find sort of groups to do, like if it's hiking groups or whatever it is, I find them through there. But all these things, like even 3, 4 years ago in the thick of COVID, I didn't use, and maybe they were out there then, but I remember at that time I felt very isolated. And since then, like through the podcast, LinkedIn, all these different ways, it's a great way to connect with people all over, and it's amazing, all the different stories people have got and all the different ways we can connect. And I imagine for you, it must be so joyful as well that you're coming up to 10 years with your podcast now. I bet time's flown, hasn't it? Right?
It really has. I mean, it's been great. I've interviewed over 400 people. That's my thing, is I
Yeah.
interview people from entertainment, foodies, books, and music. So I've got to mostly LGBTQ, but straight ally as well. So I've got to meet some really interesting people, which has been a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Like you said, social media. I was never a social media guy. I always felt like I had the face for radio, so I didn't like being out there and everything. But you get more comfortable with it, and it's kind of part of the
Yeah.
job after a while, where if you want your podcast to reach people, you kind of have to do it. So I've kind of had fun with that lately. So I've been doing that the last
Yeah.
3 or 4 years. Like you said, LinkedIn is great, and meetup groups are a lot of fun. So that's been really good.
Yeah.
But I kind of tend to gravitate to people. I usually have at least, I would say probably 40%, 30 to 40% of my guests each year are people I've had the previous years, because I just really enjoy talking to them. I like catching up, and especially with
Yeah.
entertainers and foodies and stuff like that, music, they're always
Yeah.
making new content, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind
So
of fun.
true.
And I love to learn things. And I was never a music guy before. I'm still not really a music guy. It's like the only time I
Mhm.
ever listen to music's in my car. I never listen to it at home.
Yeah.
But I've met such great LGBTQ artists I would have never have heard of until I started doing my podcast. And now
Mm.
I love listening to them. I have them in my car. I do make playlists for my car and things. And
Oh,
so it's
awesome.
it's kind of exciting when you get to meet these kind of people. And I just feel really lucky to be able to talk to people in my own lane and learn things about other people. Like you said, from all over. I get to talk to you in England. I've talked to performers in
Yeah.
Australia, and it's
Yeah.
just been amazing. I love it.
Yeah. That's such a great thing, being able to connect with all these different wonderful faces all over the world, the community, and it's crazy how much things have evolved with technology. Growing up, I remember the early days of MySpace, and it'd be a miracle if even someone gay like befriended me on there back in the day. And now, like, having LinkedIn, being able to connect with people from the community across the world, performers, artists, it's such a great thing. And it's always great, to hear people's stories and where they're going in life, because we go on some crazy chapters and wild rides. But I often think it's when we have, those quieter moments where we start to think about life that we end up, like you with the podcast, you sort of get creative and you think, okay, what are some ways I can either connect, or what am I passionate about? And whether it's podcasting or blogging, it's such a great outlet to meet different people. And yeah, for me as well, like having podcasts, I've not really blogged, but maybe in the future. But I know you do as well. I think I read you do like a travel as well, don't you, with sort of road trips. I was
I do
wondering if you
road
do
trip.
blogs for
I've
that
been
too.
very lucky. I meet some great people on the podcast, right? And
Yeah.
you'll be doing that a lot as well. But I ended up interviewing the owner of an LGBTQ resort in Palm Springs, California, when I was living here in
Oh,
Ohio.
nice.
And we just became great. You just meet some people online, you just click, right? You click people when you're
Yeah,
talking to
yeah,
people. And so I talked to him. I said, "Thank you for such a great interview. It was great talking to you. We got to keep in touch." He says, "Well,
yeah.
I'm really slow at my resort on June, July, and August. It's like hotter than
Yeah.
hell here in Palm Springs. So nobody wants to come here tourist wise. So if you want to come, I will give you a free room for a month and I'll give you all your guests a free room for a night." So I've
Yeah.
been going out there for a month of live shows from Palm Springs, where the
Oh,
resort
nice.
owner very kindly puts me up for a month for free, puts my guests up for a night for free or two. And it's
Yeah.
just been a great thing. So I call it my big gay road trip. And I drive cross
Mhm.
country from Ohio back to California and just kind of have a great time talking to people. And it's
Yeah.
been a lot of fun.
Oh,
I enjoy it. I'd like to
yeah.
start doing it in little mini road trips, like go to New York or go to Florida or go up to Toronto, Canada or something. So I'd love to come to England. So I've never been to the UK. So that would
Oh
be
yeah,
fun.
you definitely have to come over. There's so many little spots in the UK, which are fantastic, that are not the typical spots that people think to go to as well, like outside of, because people always think, like London, Oxford, but there's so many places up north as well. But I think it's fantastic when you can travel and also engage with people from the community, because it's always fantastic to have a tour guide, and also have that connection. But I always think you guys in the US, you do really long road trips. Like for us in the UK, it's
We
like to go an hour or somewhere to Manchester seems like a long time. And then I see you guys literally cross country, right? From, I'm not sure how many hours is it to California for you?
It was a lot different when I moved back here because that it's very much that way in the Midwest and Eastern. Unless you're in a big city, people
Yeah.
don't want to travel. Like a half an hour is a long time. But when you
Yeah.
grow up in big cities or in Southern California or New York or something like Chicago, it's not that weird to commute for hours. So I didn't mind all the commute all the time, but the road trip was new. That's the
Yeah.
first time I did it, I kind of overdid it a bit. I let my mom come with me. And so
Oh,
we
nice.
decided to make a circle of the United States. So we went
Yeah.
down south and went up north and then across these. We did
Oh,
7,000
awesome.
miles in a month.
Oh,
It
wow.
just in the car. It was crazy, but we had
Yeah.
such a good time. But it
Yeah.
just it things are so far apart here now that you almost have to travel to get to anything good. But I would
Yeah.
love for you to be a tour guide sometimes. I'm a huge Greek and Roman mythology nerd, and so
Yeah.
Greece and Rome are two places I have to go, at least in
Oh,
Europe. So I want to start in UK and kind of go to those two places for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. You definitely have to. And it must have been an incredible experience, to do a road trip all around the US, because we always see it over here in Europe and think of it in the movies. But to actually do it must be, fun to just be like, right, I'm doing this. I don't know how many days I'm going to be gone for exactly, but it's time to just pack the van and go.
You need to. I think everyone needs. I mean, like you said, there's so many freaking travel gays out there, right? That are going
Yeah.
to Ibiza and Puerto Vallarta, and kind of
Yeah.
they really have figured out how to get it done. And I'm very impressed with people. I don't do anywhere near that. I do one big trip a year, and that's it. But I'm
Yeah.
just so impressed with people that travel and meet new people and are able to find different parts of the culture and part of our LGBTQ community that I would have never thought of before. So I'm very impressed. And I've never used my podcast for monetary gain. I've never really done ads or anything like that, but I do
Yeah.
use the kind of the perks of it. So I'll go to fun events. I'll do the things like going to California when I met someone, or I'll
Yeah.
couch surf at different people's houses, or I'll go to a music festival I've been invited to cover for the podcast. So I use that kind of fun perks of it. And then you
Yeah.
find yourself a little sponsor, you save yourself a little money for it, and it's a great time. So you're going to find yourself doing that soon, I'm sure. I just see the way you connect with people and you make these great connections with people that you will be starting to do that sometime very soon, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's so fantastic with the community how so many of us are so open to connection, especially after COVID. Like, I can't believe it's been almost 5 years, but it feels like, since then, like, this people, especially now, want to do more than things that we maybe put off before or made excuses for. It's like, no, I'm just going to do the road trip or go on the trip now, because who knows what, especially with this year, who knows what's coming next, in the world.
Oh,
And so
in
it's
the
like, if
US
you've
for
got,
sure. That's for sure.
yeah, it's like if we've got like an excitement or this urge to do something, we've just got to do it, and not make the excuses. Because I think there's so many fantastic people out there we can meet. There's so many events. There's so much community building that we can do as well. And that's one of the fantastic things with the podcast and social media, being able to connect with these people all over. And
Right.
the great thing with a lot of these groups as well, like Meetup, they make it a world of possibilities. And how about
Right.
for travel plans next year? Have you got anything sort of planned for the new year yet, or are you going to sort of plan it after the Christmas period?
I'm starting to plan the Palm Springs next year already. That'll be a for sure thing. And
Yeah,
then like I said, I'm trying to plan some little small trips. So maybe a week in New York, maybe a week
yeah,
in Florida, maybe a week in Toronto, maybe a week in Chicago, maybe. It all depends
yeah,
on, like I said, I don't make any money off this, especially. I'm kind of
yeah,
semi-retired. So it depends what I feel like saving towards and going. But I would love to kind of take the show and just showcase different things. So that's my
yeah.
goal. Palm Springs is a definite, and I have some many week-long excursions I'd like to do.
Oh yeah, that sounds awesome. I think, it Palm Springs, I've only seen, like little glimpses of on TV, but it looks like such a fun place to go. And I can only imagine, though, the heat in the summer. Imagine it's a lot of hats and sunscreen, but such a great experience.
It's hot as heck in the summer, but it's beautiful the rest of the year. And believe it or not, their population is 59% LGBTQ. It's a little
Yeah,
bit of an older population, which is good for me. But they have most of their city council and everything is all LGBTQ. I mean, it's one of the probably more gay friendly cities in all of North America. So, or all of
yeah,
US. I won't say North America. Toronto is very friendly and stuff. But in America, it's one of the better LGBTQ cities. So I
yeah.
really enjoy going there.
Oh, nice. Well, I'll definitely have to add it to my travel list at some point. I've not been to the US for maybe the last time I went was New York, and I was 16. So it's been, yeah, 17 years now. So I've got to get over and stop making excuses, start traveling more again in the new year, because it's been on my list for a while. But anyway, before we wrap up, I'm doing this with all my guests at the moment, sort of going into the new year for 2025. What are your main resolutions and goals you're looking to achieve as we go into 5 years since COVID? Has gone so fast. Halfway through the decade already.
Right. Resolutions for myself are I have been spending this year and I want to go into next year building the more solid friendship foundations and everything, trying to get
Yeah,
more because I am so nomadic with the podcast, talking to people all over the place that I really want to establish those hometown things. I'm looking to start, that's one of my goals is to start a brand new local podcast. My podcasts have been national for 9 years, right? And it's a whole
yeah,
different animal than local. So I really want to help expose my local community, because we have a vibrant LGBTQ community. It's kind of just under the surface a bit, and I
Yeah.
think it takes people that are willing to talk about it and willing to go out. And we have such a great mid-younger community here in the 20s and 30s here that are really just starting to embrace it. And so I
Yeah.
want to help facilitate that through either bringing people in town that they can do different events with. And that's one of my goals, is to make the event planning part of Left of St8 podcast. I did
Yeah.
that a little bit last year for my very first time. When I was in Palm Springs last year, I did a fundraiser for the community center in
Nice.
Palm Springs, and I raised $3,000. So that was
Amazing.
exciting. And that's my goal for this year, is to kind of do something like that in my local community.
Yeah, I think that's such a wonderful objective to have, being able to give back, and also the joy that comes with event planning as well. Because it's exciting, is it, being able to bring people all together and, all planning all the little things that sometimes we can go over like meticulously, like, okay, I want this this event, but it's become such a fun thing when you get to the day of the event and all the people you can meet and having that connection.
Exactly. I think that's so well said, and exactly what I think we're hoping to do. We're here to connect, right? That's what podcasters do. We connect people, we share stories, and we kind of keep our community alive that way. And I think it's very
Yeah.
important that we keep doing what we're doing. And especially with things like yours, you're working with your ADHD and with mental health. I think we have a lot of extra things that we deal with the whole coming out process, and with the non-acceptance and learning to love
Yeah.
ourselves. I think it's great to talk to other people and find out other stories how that happens. So thank you for what
Yeah.
you do. I think it's amazing.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's so rewarding, all the ways we can connect with people now, and it's, as we go into the future, this is for me as well the same objective, being able to have these connections and be so open. Who knew? Like, looking back to, the 20, 30 years ago, that we have these outlets where we'd be able to connect with so many people. And I always think, even if it resonates with one person out there and they just happen to stumble across the video and somehow they relate to someone's story, then I always think, even with that, then, I'm doing my job. Like, there's someone out there that can find this, that could just be scrolling YouTube, or maybe, they really connect with the story of one of the guests or one of our personal stories. So there's just a world of possibility with it, which I think is fantastic, considering, growing up, it felt like, oh, it's, other than a few books or TV shows, that's all we had for a lot of, hearing the real voices of people was something that
Right.
was a lot more difficult back then. So being able to have it in the present and also facilitate that for other people to express, their truth and stories, is one of the most rewarding aspects to it.
Exactly. And I think it's just so important. It's why what we do is going to be going on for a long time after us. And I'm very proud to be doing what I'm doing, as you should be.
Yeah, for sure. And before we wrap up, I just wanted you to pimp out your socials. So where can people find you, come to the podcast? How can people get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, thanks, Connor, so much for letting me on. I'm glad we're going to do a podcast swap and have you on mine very
Yeah.
soon. You can find the shows, all of my shows, everything at leftofstraight.podcast.com. And that's STR and the number 8 for straight. So www.leftofstr and the number 8 podcast.com. And you can follow me on all social media by going there. And if you like coffee, I have a nonprofit coffee company. You can go to leftofstraightcoffee.com and order some great coffee all over the world for free shipping, and it's kind of fun too.
Ah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and being so open today with your diary. So it's been great having you on the podcast. And so, to all my guests, thank you for tuning into the Queerness Diaries, and we'll be back again next week. So thanks so much, Scott.